Hello everybody, welcome to another edition of World Lit with Shubs. In today's video, we are going to see one of the books that was the most impactful for me in 2020. The book is called Lost Children Archive. It was written by Valeria Luiselli. Valeria Luiselli is a Mexican author. This is the first book that she wrote in English. The book is set in New York City and at the Mexican-American border. The book was inspired by the ongoing American policy of separating the children from their parents at the border control. It is a road trip story that focuses on the children who cross the US borders, facing death, being detained, so that the readers can, to some extent, understand the suffering. Every year, tens of thousands of unaccompanied minors cross the southern borders of the US to confront an immigration system which is ill-prepared and hostile. In 2017, Valeria Luiselli wrote a book called Tell Me How It Ends, an essay in 40 questions, based on her experience as a volunteering interpreter at the immigration court, helping lawyers decide which children were eligible for relief. The book was a passion project for Luiselli, but she felt the non-fiction format was not that impactful, so she adapted her research and finding into a fiction format, which became Lost Children Archive. Through Lost Children Archive, Luiselli prods us to look at America from a wider perspective, across generations and cultures, through different locations and dislocations and relocations, including her own. She was born in Mexico, but she was raised in South Africa, and now she has made New York City as her home. The central theme of the Lost Children Archive is the refugee children at the US border and the hardships they undergo to escape the abuse and violence in their countries. The central theme is explored through the myriad negotiations of the married life of the protagonists. The protagonists are on a road trip with their respective children. Their names are not mentioned in the book. They are only identified through their pronouns. The couple met at Columbia University while working on an oral history project documenting the myriad voices, languages, and the sounds of NYC. The woman brings her 1-year-old daughter, and the man brings his 6-year-old son to the relationship. The children call them Ma and Pa and become a single familial unit. The relationship between the boy and the girl is like a silk thread, strong yet delicate, but not so for the parents. Their project is completed, their marriage is falling apart. They have different expectations from life. They want different things from life. The man is obsessed with the Apaches. He wants to relocate to Arizona to film a documentary on the Apaches. Her life is in New York, where she volunteers in immigration court, and she wants to record the children's stories. She's drawn to a Mexican friend whose 2 daughters are detained at the Mexican border. The couple is traveling south in the direction opposite to the incoming migrants. This is not a summer road trip, more like a descent into the dark recesses of the underworld, like a deeper journey into the inferno. This is consistent with the books that the man has packed for the road trip: The Cantos, The Wasteland, Lord of the Flies, Carmen McCarthy's The Road. The Road, an audiobook, is to the couple's frustration, queued up on the player, and every time the man switches on the player, a voice narrates the story. When he woke up in the woods in the dark and the cold of the night, he'd reach out to touch the child sleeping beside him. It's a reminder that the children are the leitmotif of this book, not just their children, but also the migrant children whose stories they follow on the radio, on the news, through their journey. And the Apache children, whose legends the husband time and again keeps narrating to his children. The wife also reads from the Elegies for Lost Children, which is loosely based on the book called Children's Crusade, in which thousands of children travel to Jerusalem in 1212 in an attempt to reclaim Christendom. The story is developed like a Polaroid picture that develops and captures the image, much like the Polaroid camera that the woman gives the boy for his 10th birthday. It is slow, layers get added, and develops into an image, sometimes blurring the lines, sometimes crystal clear. The son tries to take pictures with the Polaroid camera only to find that the images get blurred or the images vanish when exposed to light. We understand that the novel is about ensuring that The subjects are caught in a frame and they do not vanish when exposed to light. The husband's research is on the Apache's last tribe that vanishes from history as prisoners of war, and the woman is determined not to let the refugee children vanish from the history. As the family drives into the desert, the stories of these migrant and undocumented children intertwine. The boy and girl wander off into the desert and are lost. They meet a bunch of migrants and they spend the night with them in the hills of the Apacheria. As the drama unfolds, Luiselli expertly weaves together narratives through several generations, perspectives and cultures, creating a conclusion that can be only described as an astounding singularity. The first part of the book is narrated by the mom, the second part by the son. The children are well portrayed, they are intelligent, they are perceptive, their dialogues are excellent. The son realizes the disintegration of the family. He realizes that the road trip to the Echo Mountain is the last trip they will be taking together as a family. The boy remembers his pediatrician mentioning that children who are below 6 do not have memories of their own, of their lives. For this reason, he records his story for the sister to know when she grows up. The simple thought of a brother not wanting his sister to forget him was heart-tugging. The imagery of lost children is again and again introduced through several historical events: eagle warriors, orphans who were sent from the east to the west on trains for either adoption or to be sold as slaves, the narrator's own life story, and the children running away. Lost Children Archive gives us a deeper look into the lives of these migrant stories and reiterates the point that such stories need to be told again and again so that the conversation is ongoing and that people do not forget such stories. According to her, the stories don't fix anyone or save anyone, but maybe make the world a more complex and more tolerable. And sometimes it is beautiful. The first chapter is narrated by the mom, and here it goes. Procedures. First, it was just translating legal papers, the girls' birth certificates, vaccination records, one school report card. Then there was a series of letters written by a neighbor back home and addressed to Manuela, giving a detailed account of the situation there, the untamable waves of violence, the army, the gangs, the police, the sudden disappearances of people, mostly young women and girls. Then one day, Manuela asked me to go to a meeting with a potential lawyer. The three of us met in a waiting room in the New York City Immigration Court. The lawyer followed a brief questionnaire, asking questions in English that I translated into Spanish for Manuela. She told her story and the girls' story. They were all from a small town on the border of Oaxaca and Guerrero. About 6 years ago, when the younger of the two girls turned 2 and the older was 4, Manuela left them in their grandmother's care. Food was scant, it was impossible to raise the girls with so little, she explained. She crossed the border with no documents and settled in the Bronx where she had a cousin. She found a job, started spending money back. The plan was to save up quickly and return home as soon as possible. But she got pregnant and life got complicated and the years started speeding by. The girls were growing up, talking to her on the telephone, hearing stories about snow falling, about big avenues, bridges, traffic jams, and later about their baby brother. Meanwhile, the situation back home became more and more complicated, became unsafe, so Manuela asked her boss for a loan and paid a coyote to bring the girls over to her. The girls' grandmother prepared them for the trip, told them it would be a long journey, packed their backpacks, Bible, water bottle, nuts, one toy each, spare underwear. She made them matching dresses, and the day before they left, she sewed Manuela's telephone number on the collars of the dresses. She had tried to get them to memorize the 10 digits, but the girls had not been able to. So she sewed the number on the collars of their dresses and over repeated a single instructions. They should never take their dresses off, never. And as soon as they reached America, as soon as they met the first American, be it a policeman or a normal person, they had to show the inside of the collar to him or her. That person would then dial the number sewed on the collars and let them speak to their mother. The rest would follow. And it did, except not quite as planned. The girls made it safely to the border, but instead of taking them across, the coyote left them in the desert in the middle of the night. They were found by the border patrol at dawn, sitting by the side of a road near a checkpoint, and were placed in a detention center for unaccompanied minors. An officer telephoned Manuela to tell her that the girls had been found. His voice was kind and gentle, she said, for a border patrol officer. He told her that normally, according to the law, children from Mexico and Canada, unlike children from other countries, had to be sent back immediately. He had managed to keep them in detention, but she was going to need a lawyer from now on. Before he hung up, he let her speak to the girls. He gave them 5 minutes. It was the first time since they had left on the journey that she had heard their voices. The older girl spoke, told her they were okay. The younger one only breathed into the phone, said nothing. The lawyer we met with that day, after listening to Manuela's story, said sorry she could not take on their case. She said the case was not strong enough and gave no further explanation. Manuela and I were escorted out of the courtroom, along corridors, down elevators, and out of the building. We walked out onto Broadway into the late morning, and the city was buzzing, the buildings high and solid, the sky pristine blue, the sun bright, as if nothing catastrophic were happening. I promised I'd help her figure it out, help her get a good lawyer, help her in any way possible. This chapter is narrated by the boy. Sargasso Sea. This whole country, Papa said, is an enormous cemetery, and only some people get proper graves, because most lives don't matter. Most lives get erased, lost in the whirlpool of trash we call history, he said. He spoke like this sometimes, and when he did, he was usually looking out through a window or at some corner, never at us. When we were still back in our old apartment, for example, and he got mad at us for something we had done or maybe not done, he would look straight at the bookshelf, not at us, and say words like responsibility, privilege, ethical standards, or social commitments. Now he was talking about this whirlpool of history and erased lives, and looking through the windshield at the curvy road ahead as we drove up a narrow mountain pass where there were no green things growing, no trees, no bushes, nothing alive, only jagged rocks and trunks of trees split in half, as if old gods with giant axes had got angry and chopped this part of the world apart. What happened here, you even asked, looking out the window, though you didn't usually notice landscapes. Papa said, genocide, exodus, diaspora, ethnic cleansing, and that's what happened. Ma explained that there had probably been a forest fire. We were in New Mexico, finally in Chiricahua Apache territory. Apache was the wrong word, by the way. It meant enemy, and that's what the Apache's enemies called them. The Apaches called themselves Inde, which meant people. That's what Pa told us as we drove on and on in that lonely mountain pass, higher and higher, everything around us grey and dead. And they called everyone else Inda, he said, which meant enemy and stranger, but also meant I. They called all the white Americans white eyes, he told us, but we already knew that. Ma asked him why, and he said he didn't know. She asked him if I and enemy and stranger were all the same word Inda, then how did he know that the Americans were called white eyes and not actually white enemies? Pa thought for a while, stayed silent. And maybe to fill in the silence, Ma told us that Mexicans used to call white Americans güeros, which could either mean empty or with no color. Now they still call them güeros. And Mexican Indians like Ma's grandmother and her ancestors used to call white Americans borrados, which meant erased people. I listened to her and wondered who were actually more borrados, more erased, the Apaches that Pa was always talking about but we couldn't see anywhere, or the Mexicans, or the white eyes, or what it really meant to be borrado, and who erased who from where. There are many allusions to several literary works that add interest and introspectiveness. Luiselli gives a list of reference at the end of the book. Sontag's journal entries appearing in the narration tells us why the marriage has gone sour. On a personal note, I really liked that Luiselli mentions Samantha Schwebling's Fever Dream, in which the central theme is the rescue distance, a calculation of the longest distance a mom can let her child wander before swooping in to rescue her from danger. This is another brilliant book from an Argentinian author, which I will be reviewing in the subsequent videos. I hope you liked today's video. I think this book is one book that I would want everybody to read. Thank you for watching today's video. I will see you next week with another awesome book. Bye. Take care.